Well, greetings and welcome to episode 124 of Bible 180. 180 episodes between Genesis and Revelation. Today we're on the lost chapter of the Gospel of Luke. Luke chapter 15, where Jesus tells the story, the parable of the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son, prodigal son, and the lost brother, the elder brother, which is the point of the parable. Now, the Pharisees and scribes were gathering around Jesus at the beginning of chapter 15, and they were grumbling and saying to one another, "This man receives and welcomes sinners and eats with them." Because the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious people of Jesus' time, didn't like it that Jesus spent time with outsiders, tax collectors, sinners, and the lost people of Jesus' time. That's why Jesus told three parables or stories only in Luke to get across his point that lost people matter to God. The prodigal son and the response of the elder brother is Luke 15, chapters 11 through 35. And both of them were lost, the prodigal son and the elder brother. The prodigal son was eventually found, but the elder brother, well, we don't know exactly whether he was ever found or redeemed. That's really the point of the parable, not so much the foundness of the lost coin, the lost sheep, the prodigal son being lost and then found, but whether or not the older brother was ever found or redeemed. Now, the story of the prodigal son, which that's what we call it, touches all of us at different points. Some of us might have the experience of being a parent of prodigal sons or daughter, and you know the pain of one waiting for the prodigal son or daughter who is off doing all kinds of things that you don't approve of, waiting for them return. Some of you might feel like the son who has wandered far away from family or friends, and kind of not sure whether you want to get back or not. Still, others might feel like the elder brother who sits obediently at home and resents it when his younger brother, sinful, disobedient younger brother, comes home and the father throws a party for him. But let's think about the story of the prodigal son. Remember, it begins with the Pharisees and scribes. This man receives sinners and eats with them. The younger son in the story of the prodigal son had all the security you could ever want. He had a good home, a good father, a good job, an inheritance that would take care of him when his father passed on. But for some reason, the young son was restless. He experienced what all young people experience at one time or another. He simply got bored with his family life and wanted to expand his boundaries and experience life in the real world by himself. So he went to his father to ask for his inheritance, which, if you think about it, is like telling his father, "Dad, I wish you were dead, because if you were, then I would have an inheritance." The younger son thought the grass was greener on the other side of the fence, and his restless spirit caused him to demand his inheritance and leave home with the money. The younger man was restless. He felt like he was missing out on the fun. The inheritance that his father would give him represented his escape from what he thought would be the rules and regulation of his father's house, when in reality, his father's house provided shelter and safety and protection. So the son starts his journey away from the father and wasted all his money in wild and dissolute living. He probably bought a fancy new car, new clothes, a gold chain around his neck, likely headed out to all of the hot spots to party hardy. His life was filled with bright lights and loud music and late nights. He was going to have fun till his daddy took the T-Bird away. But since his daddy wasn't around anymore, he kept doing whatever he wanted, eating, drinking, laughing, and wasting his money in lewd and desolate living. And for a while, he was having the time of his life. But then his money ran out, his friends disappeared, the T-Bird was repossessed, and he was out on the streets eventually eating food offered to pigs in a pig pen. And that wouldn't have been bad. I mean, who doesn't like bacon? Oh, that's right. He's Jewish. He can't eat bacon. And he was reduced to eating the slop that the pigs ate. But the prodigal son soon came to himself and started his slow but sure journey back to his father. And while he was at a distance, his father saw him, dropped everything he was doing, and ran down the path to welcome his son home, because of the father's love, like God's love, is for those who are lost. And when they come home, there's rejoicing in heaven with all of the angels singing the Alleluia chorus. That's how God responds when those who are lost or those who have strayed come home to him, no matter what kind of prodigal they've been. One thing I know for sure is that God doesn't care so much about where you've been. God cares about where you're going. God cares about the direction of your life, where you are right now, where you're going. God's arms are always wide open, and when you receive God's embrace, you literally can hear the angels singing in heaven. So the father kills a fatted calf, and they began to rejoice. All of them well, not all of them. The elder brother didn't rejoice at all. The elder brother resented that the party that the father was giving for the son who now returned home was now money from his inheritance, because the younger son got his inheritance. So the party was being paid for by the elder son. Like Jonah that we talked about many episodes ago, the older brother wanted justice more than mercy. He believed that the lost son didn't deserve the party, and that the father throwing the party for the lost and returned brother should not have happened. And when you look at the pronouns, many times in church, you hear the story about the prodigal son and how great it is, but you don't hear about the elder brother. Notice the pronouns when you read Luke 15 at the end that the elder brother and father used, and it becomes even more clear. When the elder brother heard the party going on, he asked his servants what was going on, and the servants told him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf," right? The elder brother refused to go in, and when the father came out, the elder brother said, "I have worked as a slave all these years, and you never gave me a party, and now this son of yours," he doesn't say my brother, "this son of yours came back, and you killed the fatted calf. This son of you." He wanted nothing to do with his younger brother. But the father doesn't hear any of that, and he says, "We had to celebrate because this brother of yours," he hands the prodigal son back to the elder brother, "this son of yours was lost and now has been found." The elder brother essentially disowned his younger brother, "this son of yours," but he had a father who said, "this son of yours." God's compassionate love is for those who are lost, that they may be found. Now, that's the point of the parable. Not so much the return of the prodigal, which is wonderful in itself, but the refusal of the elder brother who didn't want to come and join the party. God has a passion for those who were lost. The elder brother did not. Now, let's think about that for a moment. And what I'd like for us to think about is that, do we, like Jesus, share a passion for those who are lost, especially as a church? Do we, like Jesus, want those who are lost to be found and to celebrate when they come home, because now they have a relationship with God that's real and personal through Jesus Christ by the power of the Holy Spirit? In terms today, as a church maybe, do we want those who are unbelievers to come into a believing relationship with God? If we think having a personal relationship with Jesus is important and that it makes a difference in our lives, not only now but for an eternity, do we want those who do not yet know Jesus to come to know him? In church terms, most churches would say, yes, we really care about the lost, but then they do precious little about it. Think about a square. Make a square in your mind with 4 different quadrants, okay? Think about people. And in the upper left-hand quadrant, you have churched believers. Those are people for whom faith is a natural attitude, brings them regularly to worship with the community. Church believers are those who believe and come to church, who know Bible verses by heart, who know what guilt is, especially if you're Catholic or Lutheran, and who know that just a little bit of suffering is good for the soul, which is what all of our grandmas used to teach us. Churched believers. Upper right-hand quadrant, next to it, think about that quadrant as churched unbelievers. Okay, think about that, churched unbelievers. These are people who come to church, but who don't really believe, who don't really have a personal with Jesus. They're often people who are on the way to believing, but they're also kind of maybe on their way out of church. Churched unbelievers are people who come to church on Christmas and Easter, come to church until their kids are confirmed, and then they leave. This is a church quadrant where people think it's great that they're in a church, but as a church, we sometimes wonder whether they are churched unbelievers, wonder what they really believe, okay? Leave them there for a second. Lower left hand, think of that, unchurched believers, unchurched believers. These are people who say, I believe in God and I say my prayers when I'm hiking or golfing or sleeping on Sunday morning. These are people who say, I don't need a church to believe in God. These are people who believe in a higher power or spiritual direction in their lives. They don't want anything to do with a church. This is a quadrant of people that takes a certain type of invitation to come to church because they don't think they need it. They are unchurched believers. I don't need a church. I just believe on my own. Lower right-hand quadrant, unchurched unbelievers, people who don't believe in God, who would never consider being part of a church. Maybe they had a negative experience with a church or a pastor or a priest. They want nothing to do with church. This quadrant of people is often the most difficult to reach because there's a huge wall that they've constructed against any intrusion or invitation from people who believe to come and be a part of a church. So, what's happened in the church for far too many years is that we've focused our energies, our programs, our preaching, our worship, our style of worship. Who wants to go to it anyway? Where we focus just about everything on a church around an increasingly smaller numbers of churched believers. Many churches focus only on churched believers who want to keep things familiar. They want to focus on the inside group. Sometimes they really feel like the church is a club where people who are like-minded come together. But that's missing the point. Church is not a club. Talked to a woman one time who said, I just really want church to focus on my style of worship. I don't care about attracting younger folks or unchurched folks. I just want a church to feel comfortable. The point of church is not to help you feel comfortable. Talked to a pastor one time who put out a new church sign. I said to him, hey, you don't have the times of your services on your sign. And he said, well, those who know, know. And those who don't know, don't need to know. Missing the whole point of what church is, because the question is, does the church need to be converted to really be concerned about those who are outside of the quadrant of churched believers? Church unbelievers, unchurched believers, or unchurched unbelievers. Does the church need to identify with God's beating heart for an unbelieving world? The Pharisees and scribes said, this man receives sinners and eats with them. They didn't want to go outside of that quadrant. Church is not a club. We have our own rituals and ways of doing things, like, the pastor wears a dress and a secret handshake and secret words, peace of the Lord be with you always and also with. Who's going to say that outside of the churched believers' role? That's why it's a foreign language of what we do as church believers if we want to attract those who are outside of that quadrant. Let me tell you a story. A teenage boy entered the doors of a church where he hadn't been for a long time, even though his parents had brought him up at that church. He had grown older, as had everyone in the congregation. He didn't really know why he went, but he felt a longing in his heart to go to church again. He slumped down in his chair way back at the back of the sanctuary. He pulled his baseball cap over his forehead. He dropped his head into his hands, and he started settling into a nap. He didn't really know why he was there, and kind of didn't really want to be there, but he went, and there were all these older people, and he felt out of place. Just as he was beginning to nod off, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He looked up into the face of a woman he didn't know, and he thought to himself, great, I'm in her personal chair and she's going to ask me to move, and I'm just going to get up and leave. But she didn't ask him to move. She simply placed a couple of peppermints in his hand, and she said, I'm so glad you're here this morning. I brought this to you because I really like peppermints, and I hope you do too. He didn't open that bag of peppermints. In fact, he brought it home, and he put it on his bedroom shelf, right beside his heavy metal posters, his guitar, his skateboard, and his poems that he'd written about his own emptiness and longing. For him, it was simply a reminder of peppermint grace. Several weeks, months later, he returned to that church, to another church, a different church. He felt pretty good about being there. He wasn't there for the sermon or the music. He was simply there because a friend asked him to come. He had awakened early that morning, put on his black jeans and his goth t-shirt, pulled his long hair back under his baseball cap. As he stood outside the worship space waiting for a friend, he heard someone say to him, young man, and he turned and extended his hand, but the man continued, young man, you either need to take off your baseball cap or leave the building. And so he left, and he never went back. Now, let me just say, I don't like baseball caps in church, but I'll tell you what I've seen over the years is, as a pastor, is that if a middle schooler invites a friend to church wearing a baseball cap, and if that kid comes back by the second, third, fourth time, he isn't going to wear that baseball cap anymore. He learns on his own. Unless he's told to take it off the first time he's there, then we never see him again. The truth is that each of us has the capacity within ourselves to either be the peppermint lady or the hat man. Okay? We all have within us the capacity to welcome people, even when we think their values or their thoughts about church are different than ours. We all have the capacity to shun people with our body language or our looks. We all have the capacity to heed or not heed God's passionate concern and interest and search for those who are lost. If we focus and care about people in that quadrants outside of the church believers, then we become more like the peppermint lady, because the peppermint lady figured that faith in church is something to be shared rather than the hat man who figured that faith was something to be protected. So think about that. Think about how you can be the peppermint lady, thinking and focusing on those who don't yet know Jesus. And think about giving a simple invitation, maybe to come to your church. Assuming you go to church, maybe not. If not, maybe start going to church. If so, consider inviting someone to church. Be a peppermint lady. Be someone who is concerned about those who are outside of the church believers. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Hope it's a great day. And until the next episode, I will see you later, and take good care. Bye-bye.